And we're live! Man, well, I'm glad you took some time to chat today. I'm excited to get into what we have to go over. And just for those who don't know, who are watching, this is Lance Furuyama. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir. That's the best so far.
Look at that. I just took a stab at it. And you're the VP of Operations at Factor X, among other things. California electrical contractor. You're running operations there, and also have a couple of side businesses going on, which
You stay busy.
yeah, I love it, man. Well, and yeah, you and I connected on LinkedIn over probably some of your content, and it's been awesome to. We've had a couple of chances to chat. It's been really cool, so I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah, it was cool. I had you on my show, so it's kind of a home and away, right?
Exactly. Yep. It's just coming back around. I love it. And we had a lot of fun. I loved doing the audio events on LinkedIn. That was like a fun thing to do. It's audio events are hard because I've thought about it actually. Like, there's so much good stuff sometimes that come out of those, but the LinkedIn doesn't make it easy to like reuse that or share it, and so you end up with like this kind of specialty, like exclusive experience.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons to that, but
Yeah,
they were a lot of fun.
I'm hoping they work on it. I mean, I really had the most fun doing the audio events.
Yeah,
But it was hard to control. You know, it was a lot of glitching, a lot of chaos for the people that were trying to get on stage. And I mean, that's part of the fun. I really enjoy chaos. I mean,
yeah.
they look at me as a firefighter at work. Sometimes I'm the arsonist, I think.
That's awesome though. That's like one of the things that I love about you and your story, and I want to understand more about it. It seems like you have been very willing to just jump into things and try things, and it actually reminds me of something that Seth Godin, like he's written a whole book about, but he talks about quite a bit. Is like a lot of times we tend to think that someone has to pick us, like that we're waiting for someone to say, okay, it's your turn to do the thing, or like you've hit this level, now you can do the next thing. And you're just like, nah, I'm gonna do it now.
Yeah, that's something I picked up from working with Jesse Hernandez and Jennifer Lacey. Man, it's you just get there, right? If you take a jump and you fall on your face and get up, you're 2 steps ahead of the last person.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I've been falling a lot. That's why my face looks like this.
Oh man, showing up with the jokes this morning and everything. It's early.
It is.
You're on Pacific time too. It's not early. You're in the trades, so you're like, dude, I've been working for a couple hours. Um, it's early if you're a desk jockey.
You know what it is? I sleep at like 9 o'clock every night,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
like a straight up old man. Like my wife will nudge me awake to finish a movie, but like I'm in bed at 8 or 9, and I'm awake at 3.
Oh
Just
man, 3 is an early hour.
think about that. I still got 7 hours of sleep.
Man, man, I want to,
For
but
7 hours.
man, if you're waking up at 3, I want to see some Jocko style, like, posts of your watch. You're like 3 a.m. hustling
I,
and bustling.
I probably should put some workout time in there as well. I mean, I can't say I don't have time. I've multiplied my hours per day, right?
Yeah. Oh man, no, I love that. I'm just like taking a tangent here. I love Jocko, but I find those posts just hilarious to me. It's like, yeah, you get up at 4:30. What, like, woohoo? You're still
Cool. Yeah. Cool.
whatever.
Go take your ice bath.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Like, dude, Lance gets up at 3, and I think Navy SEALs are hardcore. Man, now let's talk about what you've been
Sorry.
up to though. No problem.
Yeah. So, about 6 months ago, I started Trade Partner HQ. It was initially a course for subcontractors to pre-qualify with general contractors. Now, once I completed that course, it did well, thanks to my LinkedIn network. I mean, I built the entire business on LinkedIn. But, I had time on my hands after that. So I started doing these business and beyond interviews for fun. You were one of the
Mhm.
first guests. And people wanted to hire me to just interview them for alternative marketing, right? They have their polished, super clean videos, but
Yeah.
they're very low engagement.
Yeah.
So it shows. Well, there was somebody I'm working with. And he's like, "What did you think of my videos?" I said, I had a really strong incentive to watch it because I'm trying to win your business, and I barely made
Hmm.
it through. Like, that's
Oh man.
like, if I'm being honest with you, that's where I'm at with it. So if I was just some guy that it showed up in my feed, I'm automatically scrolling right past that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he has a super cool story. I'm gonna start dropping some of it as well. But
Yeah.
man, I'm like, where is this? Like, you are the face of this business, and this should have been what you led with.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's so huge, and that like you and I are
Music to
very
your
much.
ears.
What's that?
It's music to your ears.
Exactly. Yeah, we're very much on the same page there. Like the the people behind the business, and especially the people that we interact with on when we're working with the business, if we can bring those people to the forefront in the marketing and tell their story and have them tell the business's story and share what they know, like that's what marketing should be about. It shouldn't be about the polish and like the trying to look like somebody else. Like you need to
Yeah.
look like who you are.
Yeah, it's the differentiator, right? I mean, Cody Fournier always says the top five companies in any given vertical are all the same. But you're all saying the same stuff. Best in
Yeah,
class, world class service, under budget. Like,
yeah,
okay, you all are the same, so what's the difference?
right. Yeah. Why would you choose one over the other?
And that's
And
that's our job, right? To tell those stories.
exactly. Yeah, I was going to say like there is an element of like, needing to differentiate on those points of, for some businesses, especially when you're smaller, like if you're a small player in a big pond, you need to be able to differentiate and reach, certain people based on like, oh, well, we solved this very unique specific problem. But especially as businesses get bigger, the people are the differentiation because you have to be generalist. You have to serve, as you grow, you got to serve more markets, more, or a broader portion of the market, but you can stand out just by being yourself, by being the person that people want to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're one of the strongest voices on that, not just in construction, but in general, because people do need to be present, right? Be where your customers are. They say they're not on. I mean, a construction executive might not be on TikTok, but they might. They're
Yeah.
probably watching YouTube, and I mean, I'm sure I read somewhere or heard somewhere, and it might be wrong, that YouTube is like the second largest search engine in the world. So to say that your people aren't on YouTube, or even like decision makers or people that influence the decision are not on there, that's a pretty bold claim to make without any data.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and yeah, depending on who you serve, they might be in a different place. But to say that your whole industry is not online just shows that like you're not online with the rest of the industry. Like I've worked with a lot of different companies across construction and home service, and I've seen a lot of people who have been in that space and be like, oh well, my customers aren't online or my people aren't online, and it's like, no, you just don't know who your people are. Like,
Mm.
they're there. They're there. You gotta understand them better, and that's so. This is something I want to explore further. Like your the way that you have showed up on LinkedIn, and maybe you can start by like telling us how you got started with LinkedIn because you haven't been posting for 5 years or something, right? You just started 6 months ago. You said, right? Or a little more than that.
Yeah, yeah. So the way it started is I knew I wanted to have create a product. I didn't know what it was at the time,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I knew that you want to start getting ahead of it, creating some traction before you actually drop something, right? Not the day of.
Yeah.
So I saw LinkedIn as a new thing because for the longest time I'd log in every now and then. I've been with the same ownership group for the last 13 years. So
Mm-hmm.
for LinkedIn to be like a job search board had no value to me.
Yeah.
But I went on. I don't remember what I saw in my feed, but it was enough for me to not just automatically close the app.
Yeah.
And I kept scrolling, and I started seeing some construction content, like actual content. I believe it may have been like Jerry Aliberti or somebody like that. I
Yeah.
was like, well, this is interesting. Like, I'm actually learning something. That's crazy. Okay. And the next day I logged in. The next day I logged in, and I said, you know what? Maybe I can write write some stuff here.
Yeah,
It was a flop. It was a total bomb. It was garbage. Um, I don't
it
know. It's a
happens.
very different writing style
Yeah.
than anything. It was more along the lines of like technical writing than like
Hmm.
Facebook. But I see a lot of people post stuff that looks like Facebook, but I was on the wrong, like the boring end of the spectrum.
Oh, gotcha.
Like I read it and I was like, oh god, I almost put myself back to sleep. So
Was it
I
3
took
a.m. when
a.
you wrote it? Or?
It was, and I took a course from Justin Welsh.
Oh, really?
Uh, yeah, yeah,
I
not
love
like
him.
a consulting course. It was like
Right.
um, his lower end course,
Yeah,
but it
I
was
think
good
I've
enough. I mean, the
seen
thing
that.
for me is I learned that it's better to have an opinion on something and state it than be boring. And I
Yeah.
think I've always been very like cautious not to offend, or even if I did say something and somebody pushed back, I'll just fold because I'm like I'm not that passionate about it. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into it with you. And it really did teach me like that's what makes things interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and you're actually really good at that because I've seen or I've actually posted some stuff and I was like, yeah, this is my line in the sand. I believe this. I believe it was about like the 4 day work week, right? I was like, there's no way in hell that's going to work in construction. And you came back with like this firm is doing it and they're sizable, and you had the video. I'm like, well, damn, maybe now, and but it got the wheels turning, right? And that's healthy dialogue, and that's something that's really lacking in other forums or other
Yeah.
platforms. And
Yeah.
I don't think you. I've seen like funny memes or like babies, playing with toys, and people are arguing about that in comments. Uh, that's why I say primarily on LinkedIn because
Yeah.
people's names are tied to their employment, so they're not going to get too reckless. Well, I've seen a few, but
Yeah.
the majority
Some
of
people.
people are not going to get too reckless.
Yeah.
But I started writing in my own voice,
Mm. Hmm.
and the big thing for me is if somebody commented, I always took the time to go back and comment, whether it was a couple minutes or a couple of hours later, because like you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to take your
Yeah.
time, and especially if it was a really thoughtful one. I'm not just going to say, "Okay, thanks." like, I'm like, let's talk. Let's figure some things out.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of just been. It's not a very complex path to growth, but also it's just giving, right? If I have a couple of services that I can charge for,
Yeah.
my course, and then also the curated interviews that I do for business owners. But
Hmm.
everything else is just knowledge, man. We just transfer it back and forth.
Yeah.
If you want it at a professional level, I'll refer them to somebody else that I've met. But if you're just looking for rudimentary like info, I got you. Like just hit
Yeah.
me up.
Yeah. And it's huge. Like, excuse me, got a little a tickle. It's huge to see that when I'm on LinkedIn, I can spot from a mile away when somebody's there to serve and to add value to other people versus when they're there to promote a business. And
Mm,
it's not that the people who serve don't promote their business. That does happen. And but the key is like when you build that reputation for service, and Gary Vee talks about this, it's not original. I didn't come up with it, but like, uh, but when you build that reputation and or the Gary Vee thing, you put in the jabs,
mm,
when you swing that right hook and you you show up with something that like for people to buy, they trust you and they're ready to buy from you. And the way I look at it is like, and the way I have expressed it to other people is if you think about it, if your best friend from high school showed up, or your somebody you grew up with on the block that you knew, that you spent a lot of time with, that you trusted, who uh, you know that you knew like this person's legit. I'm not talking
mm.
about like the weird kid down the street that you didn't understand. uh, I'm talking about the weird kid that you got along with, that you're like, we're
Yeah.
best buds. If they show up at your door one day and they're like, hey, you know what? I started doing this new thing and it's XYZ, and they explain what it is in 30 seconds. And they're like, I think that it would be good for you. Are you going to say, yeah? Or are you going to be like, nah, get out of here, slam the door? Like, that's the difference between the cold pitch and a warmed relationship where you've actually built not just a lot of people look at marketing as just being like, well, we're just going to warm up these leads by like
Yeah.
teasing them with a couple things. Like that's not the same thing. It's about building a relationship so someone trusts you. They know what you know, they know like what they can come to you for, And then you've done that, you've put in that work, and now you're able to sell things and even directly say, hey, here's, the new thing I'm offering, like the video interviews, which I love it. You've done that already. You did it for free, and it helps people. It helps people like me to reach new people and share a story. And now you can be like, hey, this has been valuable to other people. Do you want to pay for it?
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you really picked up on that. I mean, it was intentional, right? It's easy to go and say, "Hey, that guy or that lady has 30,000 followers. Let me invite them to my show." It's like I like what this person's about. Let me ask them. They might have 100 connections, right? But
Yeah.
like they have a voice that I feel like needs to be amplified and heard, and it's a mutual benefit, right? It's not. I'm not a saint. It does give me content to post.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh
it,
yeah.
it does, but as I was growing my network for the course, I was really like, I don't know a lot of these people that like beyond the surface, and
Yeah.
that's when the audio event came up, and I'm glad you were there. And but I was like, man, thing just kind of happened, and then it fizzled out, and like it was just a weird thing that happens, right?
Yeah.
There's no reuse of it or repurpose of it.
Yeah.
So I went video, and the thing is, I haven't done anything video before this. But I just look at it as a conduit, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
truth is in the messaging, not so much like production. I'm working on production. I'm trying to get better at it. It's not very
Yeah.
high on my list because I think it's like the authentic imperfection in the conversations is like if you're gonna go meet somebody at a party, you're not gonna mail them all of your questions in advance and say, "This is what we're gonna talk about when we meet at the party." Like you just talk and you just see what happens, right? See what comes of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the serving attitude is it's everything, man. And like you were talking about, once you start to establish rapport with people, like I am a huge proponent of never asking a friend for a discount or a hookup or free or anything like that, because that's like if you're there to support them, right? If you can't
Yeah.
afford to, that's fine, but
Right.
don't value something that took the most valuable commodity, which is time. If you created a
Yeah.
product, a service, or you're editing or you're doing anything for somebody, that's your time and you can never refuel that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and that's the whole point of like supporting the person that who and trust is to support them. And if you just show up and like,
Yeah.
hey, can I have a handout? Um, that's the opposite of supporting. Like you're dragging them down.
Yeah, I had a talk with some friends yesterday about that. I said, my one of my brother's good friends was a mechanic, and he hooked up my brother and some of his other friends, like the real close friends, for just parts, no labor. And they went around like, "Hey, I got a guy who's just charge you for parts." And the guy was so like such a nice guy that he would just go with it. But I'm like, dude, you guys are gonna put him out of business if you keep
Yeah,
referring people this way, because he's tied up with, and you're always the most demanding when you're not paying anything. I don't know why that works, but
yeah,
you got these guys like taking up 20 spots throughout the week, paying nothing, and it wasn't even to put him on. It was to make yourself look good, like I got a guy.
yeah,
And I said, so I spoke on his behalf. I said, you guys gotta stop this crap, man. This is garbage.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's a very self-centered, like self-focused uh, thought process. But it's to bring the conversation back to LinkedIn. Like that's that's what a lot of times that's the kind of posts that are showing up that people are putting out. The kind of content. Basically, we're like, hey, I'm glad everybody's here at the party. Let's talk about me. Like,
Yeah, really weird.
that's yeah, like this is not, and then people wonder why, like, oh well, LinkedIn doesn't do anything for me. Well, it could be because that's all that you're there for, is just for you. Like, let's show up for the other people that are here, and this applies to more than just social content too. Like in business, if all you're doing is showing up for yourself, and if in every interaction and in every deal that you make and every project you do, all you're doing is just looking out for the big old me, you're
Yeah,
going to end up being like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where you make it harder for yourself by only thinking of yourself.
yeah.
And
I
then
have a question for you though,
yeah.
because I do see a lot of people putting out like fantastic, thoughtful content, like and like I would say wouldn't even be edutainment; it's straight up education. Like,
Hmm.
what tips do you have for them to like increase their engagement? Because Like it actually pains me to see like real value out there. And while like I feel guilty sometimes, right? Like I'll post a stupid meme or just a quick thought that came into my mind and it hits, and I see a friend who's like really providing value, and it might just be like no engagement, although they have a much higher follower count. Like, what do you think they can do to improve that?
Yeah. There's a couple of things, but I'm actually going to start by going countering that and saying uh, getting engagement on memes can be fun. Like I just posted another one about the like ChatGPT,
Oh
naming
yeah.
parts of an excavator. Like people love that stuff. That's great, or you post the meme of the jealous girlfriend meme or something with something construction related. Like those are fun, but when it comes to actually making a difference in the world, they don't do that. And so
Mhm.
sometimes you don't actually need to reach 10 times as many people. You just need to reach the right people with that educational content. So there is that element of it, is like you don't always have to be going viral. You don't always have to be reaching a ton of people. You just have to reach the right people with that content. But
Yeah, I'll have to
getting more.
rephrase. I'll have to reframe the question because it's just like no likes or no comments.
Oh
It's just
yeah,
that.
right. I like getting to that. Like if you're posting truly valuable content where like what you're doing and you're sharing what you know, but nobody's engaging. There's a couple of things that you can do. Number one is you might be just it might be too dry. Like it might not be at a level where people are going to sit, especially with if you think about the format, like it's LinkedIn and we're scrolling through LinkedIn and we're not necessarily there looking to solve that one problem right now. So you've got to be able to catch attention, and this is where people like might think of it as like as playing the algorithm or something, but it's really about understanding the people who are reading your content. Like LinkedIn is only going to show them a small part of your post, first of all. So that first part of your post has to be interesting. It has to be enough for them to say, man, I wonder what the rest of the post says. Otherwise, nobody's going to click the read more button. And then, yeah, you have to share. And I think you mentioned earlier about like learning to write in your own voice. Like that's huge. If you can develop a voice and you can write kind of the way that you talk, um, you know, being able to share that in a way that people are willing to read, that helps a lot. Or it also can help to do video content too. Like
Sure.
that's been a big win, especially if you can do the interview style, which is why you're doing it. Your customers love it. I'm working with a few people who are doing that. It's definitely easier to share information with someone else if you're actually sharing it with someone else, if you're like telling the story to another person. So that can help too. And then the third thing I would say is that it might just be that you aren't reaching, like you're not actually connected with the people who need to know this thing, and you need to go and you need to make connections on LinkedIn. You need to DM those people and share valuable information in the DMs. You got to show up in the comments and actually build the back and forth, because you can't just post and then sit back and wait for it to happen.
Okay, that's really good. I might share that with them. Do you also think that if they are basically on this huge, like, long monologue, that it kind of forces the audience into a mindset of like, well, you said it all. There's nothing left for me to say. Cool.
That can be the case for sure. I have seen kind of a diatribe or monologues do well, but I think it's usually on like more provocative topics or strong opinion type things, where they're like they say their piece and then people will show up in the comment either to be like absolutely, exactly, I agree, or you're the worst person in the world. That can work, but generally LinkedIn isn't necessarily the place to provide like a full course lesson. In fact, some of one of the LinkedIn creators I follow in the startup space, Anthony Pieri, he just posted this morning, I think it was, about like how they share his point of view on sharing educational content is share the kind of content that people would pay you to get access to. But they break it down. He breaks it down into small pieces, right? You're going to make it digestible. So you're going to share. He shares one little graphic illustrating one point, and then he shares that over the course of the year. He shares 365 of those. And everyone isn't going to see every piece, but he makes it easy to go and find them through his profile. And but yeah, really breaking concepts down into simple to understand things, and then definitely leaving room for other people to bring their experience and like share their perspective is helpful for sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm going to share that.
Absolutely, man. I love seeing people show up on LinkedIn like that, but there's definitely an element of like you have to understand the platform in order for it to work for you. I want to see it work for everyone, and I think there's so much room in construction for more people who can share what they know and like bring it to the table, and especially experienced people in operations, people in the field who have lessons to share. You do have to understand the platform and like figure out what works for you. Luckily, LinkedIn has a lot of options, right? We can share photos, we can share written content, we can share video. Like you can try them all out and find a format that works, but you do have to understand like it's not just, write up the first thing that comes to your head and post it necessarily. You might have to understand how other people are going to read or consume what you're sharing, and like make sure that they can understand it.
Well, that's why I really like what you're doing. I feel like if more leadership started to create their own content and really use their own voice, like if I'm a superintendent and I'm deciding between 3 companies, 2 that I've never seen or heard from the leadership, and one where I'm like, this. I'm trying to think of what was that? Turner Mining?
Yeah, Turner Mining Group.
What was his name?
Keaton Turner.
Keaton, yeah. So, if it was between that and seeing the stuff that Keaton's putting out, and you have a decision to make, I feel like if leadership's important to me, that's where I'm going. I mean, and that's the true value of it all.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. A great example of this, like what people need to understand is that Keaton's a relatively young guy. Like Keaton's not a 40-year veteran with all the knowledge in the book. He's just a person who started something, who showed up, who chose himself and was like, hey, I guess it's time for me to start talking about what I'm doing. And he does, and he's built a reputation for it, but just because he's put in the work to build it. Tell me a little bit more about like what you're doing with the business interviews, because I've been working with a couple clients on something like that, but what you're doing I think is unique, and I want to like share that. Can you explain like the format really quick, and then maybe your thinking behind how that helps?
Okay, yeah. So I'm a blabbermouth, so I could just go on. I'm like Forrest Gump, jabbering on like a monkey in a tree, and so I tell them if you'd like to get a couple of points across, email them to me in advance, and then I'll craft the conversation to eventually get to those points. But in the meantime, we're just talking like we are now.
Yeah.
And again, the point is to capture short clips. If we're talking for a half hour, there's going to be something there. We'll be able to pull 5, 6, 10 clips out of it.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, when they listen back to it, it allows them to. I've had a few people come back and with different taglines for their new campaigns or for their company, because they don't realize that that's how it's been sitting in their head until they've heard themselves say it.
Interesting.
So they've repositioned a lot of their services, or like one was they were focused on residential for the longest time, and then they made the switch to commercial because it's just a lot more profitable for what they do.
Yeah.
But they never updated anything, right? So as far as anybody else knows, they're heavy residential.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Like, well, your website doesn't say anything about that.
Exactly. Man, that kind of thing happens all the time. I think residential and commercial is a really common one, but there's a lot where it's like, I used to build websites for companies, a lot of construction companies, and you would have that constantly where it was like, well, I'd look at the website and be like, oh yeah, you do commercial electrical, or you do a residential, and they're like, well, no, we don't. Like we do a little bit of it, but like we used to. It's like, well, your website says that's all you do. It's common. I think partly because websites become like this monolith that we just put up, and it's like there, and then nobody knows how to really do anything with it, and you're gonna have to spend $5,000 to get somebody to change it. I think
No,
that's where the interview style content, or just like less of that, like, oh well, we spent 6 months planning this thing out and now we can't touch it for 5 years because it's going to cost us too much money. That just doesn't work to actually tell your story. Even with the like, even with video content, if you're, because I've also worked, when I was at a construction company, where we were a fence and deck contractor. We did some videos like that were more, I would say, more structured. We put some more work into producing that, and those videos are great, but they don't like, and they have some lasting value, right? People can go back and watch them if it's, like the videos we did were on core values and things like that. But when it comes to stuff that can change like that, like your focus on what type of projects, man, if you tell that story more frequently and you talk about it as it changes, and you're like, hey, well, we've been doing this, but we learned this, so now we realize we're much better at this kind of a project. Man, again, it's about the reputation. Like, people heard about you once 5 years ago and they thought you did the other thing. They're not going to call you for the new thing you do that they don't know you do.
yeah, it's just interesting, right? Because I think we all feel like we have some type of secret sauce, and like,
Yeah.
if I put it out there, everybody's gonna know. I'm like, not really. I mean, if you are under budgeted on time, that's already you're ahead of the game. I mean,
Yeah.
trust me.
That's
I
a
mean,
secret sauce by
there's so
itself.
much, yeah, there's so much turnover between companies. Like, I think I ran into the same project manager in 3 years. He was at three different companies,
Yeah.
and it's not because he sucks. It's because everybody kept wanting him. So I'm
Yeah.
like, all right. So if you had a secret, he has it, and it's all.
Yeah.
It's not the company that's a secret. It's that specific team, right? It's not
Right.
all of this contractor is not that good. It's that team is that good. So
Right.
don't get it twisted and think that you need to keep everything so close to the vest. It's so weird. It's so weird to just not to risk not making any business because you don't want to share with the world who you are.
Yeah. And I think there's a huge point there too of, if you've been in a large business and you've tried to change things for the better, you know right away that it doesn't matter what secret sauce there is,
Yeah.
things don't change easily. Like, your competitor's not going to be like, oh, so and so said they do this. Let's change our whole operation to do that thing. Because
Good point.
there's huge benefits, or huge, like, somebody might come in and be like, hey, we can save 20% on every job by making this change, and it'll still take 6 months or a year or 2 years to make that change, because the systems are there and they're in place. They're in place for a reason, to keep things from going off the rails, and it's hard to change them. So that's, I think, the people who will like embrace that, and who can like publicly say, hey, here's how we do this. Like, it's, share the secret sauce, and then like dare people to try and change it. Most of the companies, especially in construction, I know I've talked to a lot of construction companies and tried to convince them to change their marketing, change their operations, change, like, most of the time they already have a reason in their head why this won't work. They're not going to try it.
That's an amazing point. I mean, I just thought about that. Anytime you do try to introduce something new, whether it's lean or anything, it's immediately
Yeah.
everybody's just trying to shoot it down like
Yeah.
anti-Air Force missiles, or like they're just like, before it can even land and get consideration, they're just bombing away at that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so like, your biggest competitive advantage for protecting your trade secrets is the idea that the other guy has in his head of why what you're doing wouldn't work, would never work.
Man, that's good.
It's just a fact, and that hopefully that can help and give a few people who can get over the man in their head that's telling them don't share this with anyone. If a few people can get over that and start to share it, they can start to see the benefits from the people who have. Like, going back to Keaton at Turner Mining Group, like, they've been sharing what they do, and like, maybe not in fine detail, but it's around solving their biggest problem, which was, how do we bring people in to do this? Like, Keaton took a very different path than most people. He managed to attract a bunch of employees that that other people couldn't attract, and he talked about it publicly, about how he was doing it. Are other mining companies doing that? Not so, like, not necessarily, because it takes more than just knowing, just sharing the information. It takes a mindset change. So
That's true.
Go
If I
for
found
it.
a pamphlet on the ground saying this is how you do a backflip, I'm not suddenly going to be able to do a backflip, right?
This is
So,
true. Yes. In fact, the number one thing keeping me from doing a backflip is the guy in my head that says, that will never work. Don't do it. So,
stay in your lanes, guys.
yeah. Oh, man. Well, Lance, what's next for you? Like,
Uh,
what's the future of Lance look like?
Damn. That's a good question. I've actually kind of found like I thought my joy would be in growing the business and making money, and that it's a
Hmm.
blessing, and I'm thankful for it, of
Yeah.
course. Um, but what I've really learned is my joy comes from helping other people. Like I know it
Mm.
sounds corny, and a year ago I never would have thought I'd say something like that, but it's the way that other people that were a few steps ahead of me made me feel when they reached back and said, "Hey, I see what you're doing. Like, here's a couple of things you might want to consider. Let me put you on with my group and my people." And I was
Yeah.
like, damn, that feels nice. Like that feels nice to have people have your back and not really want anything out of it.
Yeah.
Um, so I made sure to pull a few other people up with me along the way, and that's really been the joy of it, right? Because it's super lonely when you're starting something or you're in your first year or two.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of doubt can creep into your head,
Hmm.
and being that I'm only a few months ahead of where they are, 6 months or whatever it is, I can say, look, it gets better, but you have to be able to overcome the voice in your head. And
Yeah.
people will feed you all kinds of crap when you start out on any type of entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's a reflection of how they feel about maybe a missed opportunity for them or themselves, or maybe
Hmm.
doubt that they have in themselves. And then they
Yeah.
they say it to you, you kind of brush it off, you try to just say whatever. But
Yeah.
at night, or when you're just working alone, like their shit is projected into your psyche now,
Yeah.
and you have to be able to fight that with having friends that are willing to pull you up and speak truth to you.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's really
That's
where my future is. I mean, I feel like as I continue to move up, it's pulling up people that are just a few steps behind, but also reinforcing that the way you can pay me back is by doing the same thing for somebody else.
mm. Hmm.
Because like I am not gonna go to my grave with my dreams.
Yeah.
Like that's absolutely not happening. I mean, I just refuse.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see somebody else just maybe have a deal fall through or have their spouse or their friend say something to them that just rattles them so much that they quit.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it builds accountability up and down the chain, right? Like for me,
Hmm.
if I decided to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm just gonna continue doing my day job and that's it," I'm basically wasting and it's slapping the face of the people that have helped me,
Mm.
and I'm also letting down the people that I'm helping. So in a way, it
Yeah.
kind of just puts me in the middle of the pack, so there's nowhere for me to go. Like we're gonna keep moving
Ah.
forward together.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
continuing to grow that network is really important to me because it's something that I want to first show the results so that I can pass that same mindset on to my kids.
Yeah. Man, that's huge. Yeah, and I love that mindset, like that ability to look at success not as like dollars in the bank or like followers on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
but like yeah, how what we're doing together as a as a group or as a community. That's huge.
yeah. Another
It's
thing is, we're all close enough in we can all still reach each other, right? Like, and basically anybody that I know, I could reach out to and call or set up a call with.
yeah.
But for somebody to be like I knew this guy. He's I don't know, got like 30 million in the bank or something. He's like, oh well, why don't you just do this? And I'm like, oh, it's not it's not really feasible for me at this point. But
Yeah.
so we can kind of relate, so the information flows and actually makes sense.
Yeah.
Instead of me asking the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, for some advice on running my little business, it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. I love that when people are like, "Well, what would you like? Who would you like to have an hour with? Or you spend an hour with any famous
Yeah,
person, or whatever." And it's like, none of that matters. Like you spend an hour with, Bill Gates or Jay Z or whoever. Like, it's not gonna they don't
It's
have
not,
any idea what you're doing, and they can't help you in any meaningful way, except unless they were handing you cash for that hour.
yeah.
Uh,
Warren Buffett, tell me how to become rich. Like,
yeah,
I mean, there are
exactly.
some good like overarching like lessons you can
Yeah,
take, but to me, the best lessons come from people that are in the same harbor as me.
yeah, exactly. Man, that's a great point.
Got me waxing philosophical here.
Exactly. I love how waxing is a literal, is philosophical but also literal waxing. Man,
Oh,
well,
you almost got me. I almost spit on my screen.
I had to do a spit take. Um,
Oh gosh, that's close.
before we go, there was one more important thing I wanted to touch on, which is you on your LinkedIn you have a virtual Santa listed. Can you tell me about virtual Santa?
Yeah, it's
It's that time of
that,
year, man.
that one took some arm twisting. So it's something that got brought to me by Christopher Moss, who I met on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and he's a guy who has a million things going on. And he first talked to me about it. I'm like, are you crazy? What are you talking about right now? But he showed it to me. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And his whole thing is he's been a contractor for 30 years. He's been
Mm-hmm.
a police officer, all of this stuff. And he goes, man, you have to have passive income.
Mm-hmm.
I had like this was a self-limiting belief, right? I'm like in my head, passive income meant I'm some rich dude that invested a bunch of money in something.
Yeah.
He goes, look, if you sold a couple every month and you made a few $100 a month, that's 4 grand at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Are you just gonna like burn 4 grand and be like whatever because I'm too prideful?
Mm.
Well, that makes sense.
Interesting.
He goes, it's something people want, right? I'm
Yeah.
not there like everybody watch me project this virtual Santa onto this screen. It's there, it's set up. People buy it. It's starting to pick up traction now
Huh.
because of the timing. But
Yeah.
he goes, "Who are you to say like I'm just not going to take some money that's coming my way that allows you to take it, to take care of the things that are important to you?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I mean, it was more like mind opening for me in a way." So
Yeah.
it's cool. It's a projection 3D Santa that looks like he's in your house,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
It's a cool like a novelty Christmas like the
Yeah,
window thing. That's yeah, I love it. Yeah, I saw it on your profile, and I love like the story is great because I love to see people trying things that are like not in their lane, right? Like you
yeah.
weren't the virtual Santa guy, but you are now. I mean, you're
And
doing it, right.
now,
Like it doesn't have
well,
to it doesn't have to become your whole personality, but that man the idea that you can do new things, that you can try new things, that you can like get into that's a completely different type of business in a different industry with a different all that stuff, and sometimes that stuff can be a distraction, but sometimes it can be a chance to learn something that you can apply and like that can really move you forward and like unlock something you didn't know before. So I love it.
yeah, that was my big worry, because I was like, man, I don't want to be all over the place and people don't know what the hell I'm doing because I'm doing so many things.
Yeah.
But as long as I'm able to like organize it and put it in clean boxes, it's a lot easier. But
Yeah.
what that allowed me to do is have like deeper discussions with Chris, right? Like his whole thing right now is he's buying property all over the country,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like a lot of it is like, is this guy willing to take a chance on something as small as a virtual Santa? Because he's very generous with his information and kind of his playbooks for all of his other success. So if I had just said no to that, maybe the conversation ends there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's interesting. There's a delicate balance, I think, between like learning to say no to things,
Hmm.
so that you have room to do the important things, and then learning to say yes at times that can feel counterintuitive because of the opportunities that it can unlock for you in the future. So
Well, you know what?
that's
It's funny that you're going to ask a question about virtual Santa, but it's going to take us down another trail.
yeah.
So initially, the subcontractor pre-qualification stuff that I was doing was a do-it-for-you service.
Mm.
Because I've been, working with the general contractors for so long that I had a really good understanding of how to get stuff done and push through.
Yeah.
But it was very time-consuming.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the middle of it, right? I'm asking the subcontractor for their information; they're reluctant to give it. I'm over at the general contractor begging for some grace and some mercy on it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, why did I put myself in this position? This sucks. I mean, it was very profitable, but it sucks. Like now, I'm not just arguing with the GC. I'm arguing with this person trying to get info, and they're asking me why it's not done yet.
Yeah.
And after talking to Chris and kind of changing my mindset around how passive income could work, I just changed it to a course,
Yeah.
right? So now I get a notification saying somebody bought the course. I'll check in with them, make sure they're all set up, but it runs itself, and like I've gotten my time back, which is what I was after in the first place.
Yeah.
So maybe if I never said yes to that, I wouldn't have thought that a passive income was something that I could achieve.
Yeah. Exactly. That's awesome. I love it.
Yes, sir.
That's thanks for chatting today. We'll wrap it up. This has been awesome.
Good luck. Trying to do your thing.
Awesome. Thanks, man.